Today we're going to look at binomials, but before we start our binomials, I'm going to put two factoring out the GCFs in here and let you work through those. Or three, I'm sorry, I lied. So work through these and see if you can get these answers. Okay, so let's look at number one, 28x minus a 12. So 12 does not go evenly into 28, but what goes evenly into both 28 and 12? That would be a 4. So you'll be left with a 7x minus a 30 inside here. Okay, x squared y plus an x. You have an x squared and an x, so you have an x that's in common. You don't have a y, so your greatest common factor is a x. So you'll be left with an xy here plus a 1. Number 3, you have a 6x to the 4th plus 14x cubed minus a 10x squared. So I see that I have an x present in all of them, so I do have an x squared that's in common. What about a number? I have a 6, 14, and a 10. So 6 doesn't go evenly into those, but what will? 2? 2 will go evenly into all of those. It's the largest number that they have in common. 2 goes into 6 3 times, and you'll be left with x to the 4th over x squared, which will leave you with x squared. 14 over 2 will leave you with 7 and an x. 10 over 2 will leave you with a 5. So there you go. Okay. All right, so remember, factoring is just a bunch of rules put together. So today we're going to look at the difference of two squares. Okay, so this means that we are going to, difference of two squares is two terms. Okay, this is what I like to call it, two terms. Okay, the difference of two squares means that your first term is a squared. So first term is a perfect square. The second term is a perfect square. Okay, the first and second term, first and second term have a minus sign in between. So that makes it a difference of two squares. So then you will factor using this rule. So if you have the first term is a squared and the second term is a square and you have a minus sign in between them, then you are going to factor to x minus a y times an x plus a y. Okay, so let's think about something real quick. Multiply these two things for me, x plus 2 times x minus 2. So take a minute and multiply those two things out for me. Okay, so x times x gives me a x squared. X times negative 2 gives me a negative 2x. 2 times x gives me a 2x. 2 times negative 2 gives me a negative 4. What happens to that middle term right there? It goes away, and you're going to be left with x squared minus a 4. This is a difference of two squares, and that can factor to x plus 2 times x minus 2. Okay, so this is where this rule comes from. If you have a squared minus sign, then this can factor to take, basically you're taking the square root of x squared, which gives you an x and an x, the square root of your y squared, which gives you a y and a y, and they're going to be opposite terms. So one's going to be a minus and one is going to be a plus. Okay, and then what you do is always what? Check. You should never miss a factoring problem because you can multiply it back out. Okay? All right, so let's factor. So x squared minus a 64. So is the first term a perfect square? So basically what I'm saying is what multiplies together to give me x squared? And that is an x and an x. What multiplies together to give me a 64? And that is an 8 and an 8, right? Is there a minus sign in between them? Yes. So this can factor to x minus 8 times an x plus an 8. All right, over this one. Okay. X squared, what multiplies together to give you an x squared? X times an x. What multiplies together to give you 100? 10 times 10. They're separated by a minus sign, so this is going to factor to x minus 10 times x plus a 10. Okay, what about this one? X squared is x times x. 4 is a 2 times a 2. They are separated by a plus sign. Can't factor this one, so we write a prime. Okay, what multiplies together to give me 49x squared? That's a 7x times a 7x. What multiplies together to give me a 1? A 1 and a 1. They're separated by a minus sign, so this can factor to 7x minus 1 times 7x plus a 1. Check your answers to make sure that you are correct. Okay. Is the first term a perfect square? What multiplies together to give you an x squared? An x and an x. What multiplies together to give you an 81y squared? That's a 9y times a 9y. There's a minus sign in between these, so these will separate by x minus 9y times x plus a 9y. All right, do this one for me. Okay, what multiplies together to give me 64x squared? That's an 8x times an 8x. What multiplies together to give you a 1? 1 and a 1. Is there a minus sign in between them? Yes. So this can factor to the difference of two squares. So 8x minus 1 times 8x plus a 1. So they're the same except for the signs in the middle are opposites. Okay, y'all try this one. All right, what multiplies together to give me an 81x to the 4th? It's a 9x squared times a 9x squared. What multiplies together to give you a 25? That is a 5 and a 5. There's a minus sign in between these, so this is going to factor to 9x squared minus a 5 times 9x squared plus a 5. Might go to this one for me. Okay, so what multiplies together to give you 4y to the 4th? That would be 2y squared times 2y squared. What multiplies together to give you 9x squared, which gives you a 3x times a 3x. There's a subtraction in the middle, so this is going to factor to 2y squared minus a 3x times 2y squared plus a 3x. All right, so now let's look at some examples where you have to take a GCF out first. Okay. Is there a GCF, a greatest common factor, between 18x squared and a 50? That would be a 2. So you can take a 2 out. So when you take a 2 out, you divide each term by a 2. So 18x squared divided by 2 will leave you with a 9x squared. 50 divided by 2 will leave you with a 25. Now, what you have inside here now is a binomial. There's two terms. Is the first term a perfect square? So ignore this 2 here. Is 9x squared a perfect square? 3x times 3x. Is 25 a perfect square? 5 times a 5. There's a minus sign in between them. So this is going to be able to factor to 3x minus 5 times 3x plus a 5. What did you factor out in the very beginning? A 2. So you're going to put that 2 on the outside. Okay, so is there a greatest common factor here? An 8 goes evenly into both of them, and a y goes evenly into both of them. So you could take an 8y out. So 8x squared y divided by 8y is going to leave you with an x squared. 32y cubed divided by an 8y will leave you with a 4y squared. Is this what's left over, a difference of 2 squares? The first term is x times x. The second term is a 2y times a 2y, right? There's a minus sign in between them, so that can factor to x minus 2y times x plus a 2y. What did you factor out in the very beginning? An 8y. There you go. Okay, now do this one for me. Okay, 3x squared minus a 147. So is there a greatest common factor between 3 and 147? You can take your 3 out. When you take your 3 out, you divide each term by a 3. So 3x squared divided by 3 is an x squared. 147 divided by 3 is a 49. X squared is x times x. 49 is a 7 times a 7. There's a minus sign in between these, so this is going to factor to One's going to have a minus and one is going to have a plus. So we're going to have x minus 7 times x plus a 7. You factored out a 3 in the beginning, so you're going to write that 3 down there. Okay? So that is your binomials. If you have two terms, it has to be a difference of 2 squares to be able to factor. Okay? Let's start working on your homework, and if you have any questions, let me know. Y'all have a great day.